There are thousands of cities that have disappeared from the pages of history. Some were destroyed by war. Some were swallowed by deserts. Some sank beneath the sea. And some were deliberately forgotten. More than 1800 years ago, travelers crossing the eastern deserts spoke quietly of a city called Aurelia. They said its towers were made of pale stone that seemed to glow beneath the moon. They said a river flowed beneath its streets. They said its libraries contained books written in languages that had never been spoken by ordinary men. But the strangest story was this: Aurelia was not destroyed. It simply disappeared. No army conquered it. No earthquake buried it. No plague entered its streets. One morning, according to legend, the city was there. By sunset, there was nothing. For centuries, historians dismissed Aurelia as a myth, until a young historian named Elias found a map. And on that map was something impossible: Aurelia. In the year 1897, Elias Varen lived in a quiet European university town surrounded by ancient stone buildings and narrow streets. He was 29 years old and had spent most of his life studying civilizations that had vanished centuries before his birth. Elias was not famous. He had never discovered a tomb. He had never uncovered a lost temple. His colleagues often joked that he spent too much time studying legends that had no proof behind them. But Elias believed something most historians did not. He believed that myths were often memories wearing different clothes. A story might become exaggerated over generations. A king could become a god. A village could become a kingdom. A battle could become a war between demons and angels. But somewhere inside the story, there might be a fragment of truth. One rainy evening, Elias was working alone in the university archive. The building was nearly 200 years old. Its basement contained thousands of manuscripts, maps, letters, and books collected from explorers across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Elias had been searching for references to an ancient merchant route that once crossed the desert between several forgotten kingdoms. He pulled open an old wooden drawer. Inside were dozens of rolled maps. Most were damaged. Some were nothing more than fragments. Then he found a small leather case. There was no name on it. Only a symbol. A circle surrounded by 7 small stars. Elias opened the case. Inside was a map. The parchment was yellow and brittle. At first, it appeared ordinary. Mountains, rivers, deserts, old roads. But then Elias noticed something. A city was drawn in the center of the map. Its name was written in an unfamiliar script. Yet beneath the strange symbols was a Latin translation: Aurelia. Elias stopped breathing. He had read about the city for years, but every known source described Aurelia as a legend. There was no confirmed location.
No surviving ruins.
No reliable record. And yet here it was. A city marked clearly on an ancient map. Beneath the name was a sentence. Elias translated it slowly. When the 7th star touches the river, the sleeping city shall open. He stared at the words. Then he noticed something even stranger. The map was not finished. A red line began at the western edge and continued across the desert. It ended at Aurelia. Beside the line were 3 words: "Do not arrive alone." Elias smiled nervously. He thought it was an old superstition. Then he turned the map over. There was a second message, written in a different hand, much newer. Only 4 words. "They are looking for it." Elias spent the next 3 months investigating the map. He discovered that it had belonged to an Austrian explorer who disappeared in Central Asia in 1841. His name was Heinrich Voss. Voss had written several journals about desert ruins and ancient trade routes. Most of his journals were preserved, but the final volume was missing. Elias searched libraries across Europe. Nothing. Then, one afternoon, he received a letter. The sender was a retired professor named Dr. Samuel Hart. Hart had spent decades studying ancient civilizations. He asked Elias to visit him immediately. When Elias arrived, Hart was waiting beside a fireplace. The old professor looked at the map. His face changed. "You found it." Elias frowned. "You know this map."
Hart nodded.
"I have been searching for it for 40 years. He opened an old wooden box. Inside was a black stone. It was small enough to fit in a person's palm. A golden symbol had been carved into its surface. 7 stars surrounding a circle. "The same symbol," Elias whispered.
Hart nodded.
Voss found this near the ruins of an ancient settlement. He believed the stone was connected to Aurelia. What happened to him? Hart stared into the fire. He went looking for the city. And he never returned. Elias studied the stone. What did he discover?
Hart leaned closer.
Something that frightened him. What? The city was not abandoned. Elias felt a chill. That is impossible. Perhaps. Hart pointed toward the map. But Voss wrote one sentence before he disappeared. What sentence?
Hart answered quietly.
Aurelia is not waiting for us. It is waiting for the right person. 2 months later, Elias found himself crossing a vast desert. He had assembled a small expedition. There was Dr. Miriam Hale, an archaeologist with an extraordinary knowledge of ancient languages. There was Karim, a desert guide whose family had traveled those routes for generations. And there was Daniel Reed, a former soldier who had agreed to protect the expedition. The journey was difficult. For weeks they crossed endless dunes. During the day, the heat seemed capable of melting metal. At night, the desert became freezing. One evening, they stopped beside an ancient stone well. Karim examined the surrounding ground. "We should not stay here." "Why?" Daniel asked. Karim pointed toward the horizon. "There are no birds." Everyone looked around. He was right. The desert was silent.
No insects. No birds.
No wind. Nothing. Miriam frowned. "What does that mean?" Karim answered. Something frightened them. That night, Elias could not sleep. He looked toward the stars. 7 stars formed a strange pattern above the desert. He pulled out the ancient map. The 7 stars on the parchment matched the sky. Then he noticed something. 1 star appeared to be missing. He looked again. There were 6. Then 7. Then 6. Elias blinked. A shooting star crossed the sky. At that exact moment, they heard a sound. A bell. Far away. One deep metallic note. Everyone woke. Daniel grabbed his rifle. "Did you hear that?" Karim was already standing. His face was pale. There is no village for 50 miles. Another bell rang. Then another. 3 times. Miriam whispered, "Maybe it's wind." Karim shook his head.
No.
He looked toward the darkness. That is an old warning. The following morning, they discovered ruins. Half buried beneath the sand stood a massive stone doorway. No walls remained. Only the entrance. Above it was the symbol of 7 stars. Elias compared it with the map. It matched perfectly. Miriam carefully brushed away the sand. An inscription appeared. She translated it. Those who seek the city must leave behind the desire to possess it. Daniel laughed. We've come thousands of miles for a city, and apparently we are not allowed to take anything. Miriam smiled. Perhaps that's the point. Inside the ruins was a staircase descending underground. They followed it. The air became colder. After nearly 100 steps, they reached a chamber. In the center stood a stone table. On it was a bronze object shaped like a key. Elias approached. But before he touched it, Karim grabbed his arm. Wait. Why? Karim pointed at the floor. There were footprints. Fresh footprints. Human footprints. Everyone became silent. Daniel raised his weapon. Someone is here. They searched the chamber. Nothing. Then they found a second staircase. At its bottom was a narrow tunnel. The footprints continued. Elias followed them. After several minutes, the tunnel opened into a large underground chamber. On the wall was a message. Not ancient. Modern. Written in black ink. If you found this, Voss failed. Elias stepped backward. Voss was here. Miriam looked at the wall. There is more. Beneath the sentence were 3 names.
Heinrich Voss,
Samuel Hart, and Elias Varen. Elias stared at his own name. His heart began racing. He had never been here before. Yet his name had been written on this wall decades earlier. That night, the expedition camped inside the ruins. Nobody slept well. Elias questioned Karim. Who could have written those names? Karim shook his head. I don't know. Someone followed Voss. Perhaps. Then why write my name? Karim looked toward the stars. Maybe someone knew you would come. Before Elias could answer, a noise came from outside. Footsteps. Daniel immediately stood. They extinguished the fire. Everyone waited. A shadow moved across the entrance. Then another. Then another. There were at least 6 people. They wore dark robes and carried lanterns. Daniel whispered, "We have company." One of the strangers entered. He was an old man. His face was scarred. He looked directly at Elias. "You carry the map." Elias stepped forward. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "We are the keepers." "Keepers of what?" "The city." Elias held up the map. "How do you know about Aurelia?" The old man answered, "Because our ancestors lived there." Miriam stared at him. Aurelia was real. The old man nodded. It was real. Where is it? The man looked toward the desert. Exactly where it has always been. Then why has nobody found it? Because Aurelia chooses who may enter. Daniel raised his weapon. The old man did not seem frightened. "You can shoot me," he said calmly, "but you cannot shoot the desert." Elias lowered Daniel's arm. "What happened to the city?" The old man looked at him. "That is the question you should be afraid to ask." The old man introduced himself as Nadir. He told them the story of Aurelia. Nearly 2,000 years earlier, the city had stood at the intersection of several major trade routes. Merchants came from distant kingdoms. Scholars came seeking knowledge. Kings came seeking wealth. Aurelia became famous for its library. But beneath the city was something far older. A chamber known as the Hall of the First Light. According to legend, the chamber contained an ancient crystal. It was called the Heart of Aurelia. The crystal was believed to reveal memories of the past. Not stories. Not written records. Memories. Those who touched it could supposedly see events that happened centuries before. The rulers of Aurelia initially used it to study history. Then they became obsessed. They wanted to see the future. The city's greatest scholars spent years attempting to unlock the crystal secrets. Eventually they succeeded. But what they saw terrified them. They saw armies coming. They saw cities burning. They saw kingdoms falling. And they saw something worse. They saw people discovering Aurelia. The rulers realized that if the crystal became known, powerful kings would destroy the city to possess it. So they made a decision. They would hide Aurelia from the world. Using an ancient underground water system, they redirected the river. They evacuated the city. Then they sealed the entrances. But the final ruler remained behind. His name was Ahriman. Before sealing the city, he created the keepers. Their duty was simple: protect Aurelia, and never allow anyone to use the Heart of Aurelia for power. Nadir finished the story. Elias asked, "Then why did Vos come here?" "Because he found another map." "What happened to him?" Nadir looked at him. "He entered the city." "And?" "He never came out." Nadir led them through the desert. For 3 days they traveled without seeing another person. On the 4th evening, they reached a valley surrounded by black mountains. There was no city.
No ruins.
Nothing. Elias checked the map. The red line ended there. "This is it." Karim shook his head. "There is nothing here." Nadir smiled. "Not yet." As the sun disappeared, the first star appeared. Then the second. Then the third. Soon 7 stars were visible. Nadir placed the bronze key into a small hole in the ground. The earth began to tremble. Sand moved like water. A massive stone gate emerged. It was covered with 7 stars. Elias stepped forward. The gate opened. Beyond it was a staircase descending into darkness. They entered. The gate closed behind them. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Then they heard water. A river flowed beneath the earth. They followed it. Suddenly, the tunnel opened. Elias stopped. Before them lay a vast underground city. Thousands of stone buildings stood beneath a gigantic cavern. Golden lamps illuminated the streets. Trees grew beside underground canals. Bridges crossed the water. Statues stood in enormous courtyards. Aurelia was alive. Not with people, but with light. Miriam whispered, "It's impossible." Elias could barely speak. The city was beautiful. And completely silent. Then they saw something. A man standing on a distant balcony. He was wearing ancient clothing. He looked at them. Then disappeared. They entered Aurelia. Inside one building they found the legendary library. Thousands of stone shelves filled the enormous hall. But the books were strange. Some were written on parchment. Some on metal plates. Others on thin sheets of translucent stone. Miriam became overwhelmed. This could change everything we know about ancient history. Nadir stopped her. "Remember why you came." She looked at him. "Knowledge."
No.
Nadir shook his head. "You came because you wanted answers." He pointed toward the center of the library. "And answers have a price." Elias noticed a book lying open. The pages were blank. He touched one. Words appeared. His own handwriting. "I came here because I wanted to know whether history could be changed." Elias pulled his hand away. Miriam stared. "What did you write?" "I don't know." The words disappeared. Then another sentence appeared. History remembers those who change it. A cold wind moved through the library. Then they heard footsteps. Someone was walking between the shelves. Daniel raised his weapon. "Who's there?" No answer. They followed the sound. At the end of a corridor stood Heinrich Voss. Elias recognized him from old photographs. But Voss looked exactly as he had in the photograph taken decades earlier. Elias whispered, "You." Voss smiled. "I've been waiting." Voss explained that he had entered Aurelia 56 years earlier. He had found the Heart of Aurelia. He had touched it. And he had seen the past. But he had also seen something else. The crystal did not merely show history. It connected the observer to it. Every memory became an experience. Voss had watched ancient wars. He had seen forgotten kings. He had witnessed the final day of Aurelia. And he had seen Elias. "Why me?" Elias asked. Voss smiled sadly. "Because the city has a guardian." "What does that mean?" "You." Elias laughed nervously. "That makes no sense." Voss pointed toward the library. "Look at the books." Elias looked. Every book now carried his name. Miriam stepped closer. "Maybe the city isn't predicting the future." Voss nodded. "Exactly. The books are responding to him." "Yes." Elias felt dizzy. Voss continued. "The rulers of Aurelia believed the heart showed the future. But it showed possibilities." Voss explained that every decision created another path. The crystal did not reveal one future. It revealed countless possibilities. The ancient rulers became obsessed with controlling those possibilities. They believed they could choose the perfect future. And that obsession destroyed them. Elias asked, "What happened to Ahriman?" Voss looked toward the distant towers. He tried to destroy the heart. Did he succeed?
No.
Where is it? Voss pointed downward. Under the palace. The group crossed Aurelia toward the palace. The building was enormous. Its walls were carved with scenes of ancient history. At the entrance stood two statues. One represented memory. The other represented time. Above the doorway were 7 words. The past belongs to everyone. The future belongs to no one. Inside, they descended. 1 level. 2. 3. The deeper they went, the older the walls became. Eventually they reached a circular chamber. At the center was a pool of perfectly still water. Beneath the water floated a crystal. It glowed softly. The Heart of Aurelia. Elias approached. He could hear whispers. Not words. Memories. Children laughing. Horses running. Markets opening. Kings shouting. Armies marching. People crying. Thousands of lives. Thousands of memories. Then Elias saw something else. His own childhood. His first day at university. His father. His mother. His friends. Memories he had forgotten. He stepped closer. Voss shouted, "Don't touch it." Too late. Elias touched the crystal. The world disappeared. Elias stood in the ancient city. But now it was alive. People walked through the streets. Merchants shouted. Children played. Horses pulled carts. The city was preparing for a festival. Then the bells rang. Everyone stopped. 7 bells. Ahriman appeared on the palace balcony. His voice echoed through the city. The gates must close. Panic spread. People ran. Soldiers began sealing the streets. Elias watched helplessly. Then he understood. Aurelia was not being attacked. The city was disappearing by choice. Ahriman had discovered that foreign kings were planning to invade the city. They wanted the heart. Ahriman knew that war would destroy Aurelia. So he ordered the city evacuated. But thousands refused to leave. They believed their home could never fall. Ahriman finally entered the hall of the first light. He touched the heart. He saw hundreds of possible futures. In one, Aurelia was conquered. In another, the heart was stolen. In another, the city became the center of a vast empire. In another, its rulers became tyrants. But one possibility was different. Aurelia disappeared. Its people survived elsewhere. And the heart remained hidden. Ahriman understood. The city could not save its civilization by controlling history. It could only save it by letting history forget. He chose the final path. The river was redirected. The entrances were sealed. The city vanished beneath the earth. But before Ahriman left, he made one final prediction. One day, someone would find Aurelia again. That person would face the same temptation. Control history. Or allow history to remain free. Elias watched Ahriman turn toward the crystal. The ancient ruler whispered, "Let the world forget us." Then darkness swallowed everything. Elias returned to the chamber. He fell to his knees. Miriam rushed toward him. "What did you see?" Elias looked at the crystal. "Everything." Then a voice came from the darkness. "Nadir, you have seen the past." Elias stood. "And now?" Nadir looked at the heart. "Now you must decide what happens to it." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Nadir explained. "The heart could be destroyed. Or it could be taken from Aurelia. Or it could remain hidden. But if they left it untouched, history would continue without its influence." Elias stared at the crystal. He imagined what historians could learn. Lost civilizations. Forgotten languages. Ancient inventions. Diseases cured centuries before modern medicine. He could change history. He could become famous. He could become the greatest historian who ever lived. Then he remembered the words above the palace. The past belongs to everyone. The future belongs to no one. He stepped away. "We leave it." Daniel stared. "After everything?" "Yes." Miriam looked disappointed. Then she smiled. "I think you're right." Voss closed his eyes. For the first time in decades, he looked peaceful. "I was hoping you'd say that." Suddenly the chamber began shaking. The crystal began glowing brighter. Cracks appeared across the walls. Nadir shouted, "The city is closing." They ran. The underground city began collapsing around them. Bridges broke. Stone towers fell. Water flooded the streets. The golden lamps disappeared one by one. They reached the main gate. But it was closing. Daniel pushed Miriam through. Karim followed. Elias turned back. Voss was still standing inside Aurelia. "Come on." Elias shouted. Voss shook his head. "I have stayed here too long." "You'll die." Voss smiled. "Everyone dies." He looked toward the ancient city. But not every memory needs to be carried into the future. The gate began closing. Elias ran. He escaped at the last moment. The stone gate disappeared beneath the sand. The valley became silent. The expedition stood there in darkness. Aurelia was gone. Again. Weeks later, Elias returned to Europe. He carried almost nothing.
No gold.
No ancient weapons.
No magical crystal.
Only a small piece of pottery from the ruins. He never published the location of Aurelia. Instead, he wrote a book. It was called The Cities We Choose to Forget. The book became famous. But Elias never mentioned Aurelia by name. He wrote about the danger of turning history into possession. He wrote that civilizations were not merely collections of buildings and artifacts. They were memories. And memories belonged to the people who lived them. Years passed. Elias became an old man. One winter evening, he sat beside his fireplace. A young student visited him. The student asked, "Professor, did you ever find anything that changed your understanding of history?" Elias smiled. "Yes." "What?" "A city." "Which city?" Elias looked toward the window. "One that no longer exists." The student laughed. "Was it real?" Elias was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Real enough to teach me that some mysteries are more valuable when they remain mysteries." Elias died peacefully many years later. His papers were donated to the university. Most were ordinary, but one envelope was sealed. On the outside were 7 stars. Inside was a single piece of parchment. The university archivist unfolded it. There was a map. The same ancient map Elias had discovered decades earlier. But something had changed. The red line no longer ended at Aurelia. It continued, far beyond the city, toward a place no historian had ever heard of. Beneath the line were 7 words. Aurelia was only the first door. The archivist stared at the message. Then he noticed something written at the bottom. A name. His own name. He dropped the parchment. Outside, the evening sky darkened. 1 star appeared. Then another. Then another. Until 7 stars formed a perfect circle above the old university. And somewhere far beneath the earth, a bell rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then silence. Perhaps Aurelia was only a myth. Perhaps Elias had invented the entire story. Perhaps the map was nothing more than an old piece of parchment. But sometimes, late at night, when the university halls are empty and the wind moves through the ancient corridors, the archivists say they can hear footsteps beneath the library. And if they listen carefully, they hear a whisper that seems to come from somewhere far beneath the earth. A whisper saying, "History does not forget. It waits."